everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be a little chat about all the books that I've DNF'd or haven't finished. I feel like 2024 for me has been the year for DNFing and putting books down that I'm just not enjoying, or I think I'm going to give like a low or like mediocre rating by the end of it. I thought it would be fun to do a video just talking about the books that I started and for whatever reason put down. So I know I've said the phrase DNF so many times, but if you've never heard of it before, it basically means that you did not finish a book. And I think there's none that I'm maybe there's one actually that I'm intending to go back to. So I'm going to go on my story graph, and there is a section on there for DNF'd books, and I'm going to go right down to the bottom to see what the oldest one is and basically just go through them. So the first one on here that I can see, actually that is definitely not my earliest one, but this is the one that's coming up on the bottom, and it's The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Now I remember getting about 60% of the way through this book and just not really being into it. I wasn't enjoying it and it felt like such a slog, so I decided to just put it down. And I feel a bit bad about this because it's a historical fiction and it basically makes the concept of the Underground Railroad that was a real thing in America and turns it into a literal railroad. So I think it was a kind of underground, and I say underground, I mean like a hidden network that was helping black people move from place to place, and it was a way for them to seek freedom. And from what I can remember, we're following this girl who manages to use the railroad, and then from then on I feel like it just kind of lost me. I'm not really sure what it was about this book, but for some reason I just couldn't get into it, and it took me a really long time to get to 60%. I don't want to make any comment on whether the book was good or not because I genuinely can't remember, but I know it's won quite a few awards. But yeah, for my personal enjoyment, I was just not into it. Another one that I have here is The Girl with a Clock for a Heart by Peter Swanson, and I stopped reading that in 2016. So I think I just read, what's that one by Peter Swanson? The Kind Worth Killing, and I really enjoyed that one. So I think I just wanted to read more of Peter Swanson's books, and I remember reading this on the bus to uni, and it was very focused on a romance that I just wasn't into, and I don't think I got very far into this one before I just thought, no, this isn't for me, and then I've never gone back to it. Actually, I tell a lie, 2016 I was at college. I was reading it on the way to college, not uni. Yeah, so this was a time that I was really getting into thrillers, so for me it's quite surprising actually that I DNF'd that, because at the time any thriller was doing it for me, I think. So yeah, that one clearly wasn't. Sorry, my camera's really not stable today and it just keeps falling, so sorry if it's like moving around a bit. But anyway, another book that I DNF'd in 2016 as well was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and I remember getting quite far of the way into this. I would say about 60% again. I don't know what I was doing trying to read a classic in college because I was already reading so much like academic stuff and doing so much revision, like literally that is all I ever used to do. So I'm not sure why I tried to read this kind of book. Yeah, I didn't like it. I found it really boring. And my boyfriend read this year for his uni degree and he said they really enjoyed it. I've seen a lot of people really like this for like more of an accessible classic, so maybe it was just the wrong time. I was only 18 or 19 and I don't think I'd ever read a classic before other than like 1984, those kinds of books, like more modern stuff. So to all of a sudden jump to something that old, probably not a good idea. So since then I have read a few older books, so like Frankenstein, that's the only one I can think of. That might be it actually. So maybe I'll give it a go again one day, but yeah, at the minute I don't really have any desire to go back to it. Then we seem to have a little bit of a gap between 2016 and 2020 where I basically didn't really read anything, which is probably why I didn't DNF anything. When I was at uni, I think I read about 5 books in total, so yeah, we didn't see any DNFs till 2020. And the first book that I DNF'd was Strange Weather by Joe Hill, and I remember being so excited for this book because one of my biggest fears is like unusual weather. I used to have nightmares about hurricanes, tornadoes, that kind of thing. If the sky looks a funny colour, I get a bit freaked out. This sounded perfect because I thought it would be kind of all about that, and it was, I think, maybe 4 different short stories, and I think I read the first 2 and they were quite long, I would say, for short stories. I didn't really love the writing style. Now I think that Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, and I felt like there was a similar sort of writing style there where there's a lot of like ramble, very overly descriptive writing, and yeah, it just wasn't my favourite. I think I read 2 and I didn't want to read anymore, so I gave up on that. The next book that I DNF'd also in 2020 was The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, and this is another one that I'm kind of surprised at because this is a post-apocalyptic like zombie book, but we're following this girl who I think is a zombie, and they're basically at this school where they're trying to teach them still, but they're obviously under like quarantine and things like that. I think I got about a quarter of the way through this book. I just wasn't hooked, I wasn't bothered. I wasn't like interested in the characters or where it was going. I think I tried to read it again at some point and I still had that same feeling. And I even bought it at a charity shop maybe last year, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this book a go. And I know that I'm never going to read it. So I think I ended up giving it back to a charity shop because yeah, I just need to admit that this one is not for me. The next book that I have here I DNF'd in 2021, and that was Under Her Skin. I think it was edited by Lindy Ryan and Tony Miller. I think I got this one on NetGalley because of the cover. It's a very beautiful cover, and it's kind of a feminist horror short story collection. I got about 60 to 70% of the way through this book, and I just felt like a lot of the stories were very similar. It was quite a big collection, and a lot of them had a lot of the same kind of themes and ideas, a lot about body image, and I felt like I was just reading kind of the same thing over and over again. Maybe this would be the kind of book that would be better to read alongside something else. I think maybe when you're reading just this, it can feel a little bit samey, but yeah, when I got to like 3/4 of the way through, I just had no desire to read anymore, so I ended up unfortunately not finishing this. And then next, also in 2021, I DNF'd So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson, and I remember listening to this on audio, and I thought this would be a really fun look on society and our tendency to like cancel celebrities and shame people when they've done something wrong, and kind of the ethics and the morals around that, and should we be like looking after people, should we be considering people's mental health and well-being when these kinds of things happen. So this I think was first published in 2015, so a little bit dated now. I didn't realise this at the time, but Jon Ronson I think is a comedian. There was lots of stories about him and him trying to be like funny and put his own personality in there, whereas I think I was expecting more of a almost an academic book or just like a non-fiction, whereas you could really tell that he wrote this book, and I think he narrates the audiobook. He's got quite an unusual voice, so that kind of put me off as well. And then when he started talking about the case studies, I'd never heard of these people, I'd never heard of the reason why they'd been shamed, so for me it just didn't really connect with me. I needed something that was a bit more familiar that I could actually relate to, and yeah, unfortunately this wasn't it, so I didn't really enjoy this, and that's why I DNF'd it. The next one here, I don't even know if this is really a DNF, but it's Mirrorland by Carol Johnston. I stopped reading this in 2022, and I think I read it, well I listened to it on audiobook on a drive. By the drive home I think I'd given up on it, so I can only have listened to about maybe an hour and a half of this book. But this was about I think 2 sisters, and it was kind of a mystery thriller, but I thought it was going to have some speculative elements to it, and I don't know, something about the writing was just very sort of over dramatic. I can't have got that far into this one. I would say no more than like 10%, so take that with a pinch of salt. The next one, I was really sad about this, but it was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, and again I think I got like 60% of the way through this one, so I obviously get quite a way through these books before I eventually decide to stop them, but this was my sort of entry into romance, and I'd heard that this was quite a good one for people that don't like cheesy romance. Some parts of it were fun and enjoyable, but at the end of the day it was still a little bit cheesy, and I didn't really love either character, so I didn't get attached to either of them. I think I ended up reading the Wikipedia for this, and I think my feeling was at the time that I wouldn't have enjoyed the way that it all went down anyway, but this really set me off on like, okay, I'm just not gonna like romance. And probably to this day the only romance, like true romance, that I've enjoyed is Happy Place by Emily Henry, but I do have a couple others on my TBR at the minute. I've got Book Lovers, which I own physically. I have a few Abby Jimenez books which I want to read because I've heard that again they're quite like similar in tone, and I think I will quite enjoy those. And then surprisingly, I kind of forgot about this one. Also in 2022 I stopped reading Keep It in the Family by John Mars. Normally I really enjoy John Mars's books. I say normally, I did a reading vlog a few years ago where I read 4 all in one go, and I think I enjoyed every single one of them. and 2 of them were 5 stars, so it was a really successful reading vlog. But then that was my first attempt to read one after that video, and I honestly don't remember anything about this book. I don't know why I put it down. Part of me thinks that it was because it was really like silly or like over the top, or I just wasn't bothered about the characters. It must have been a combination of all of it because I genuinely can't remember. I'm pretty sure I skipped through this book to try and get the twists and the ending because I was still kind of interested in what happened. I just couldn't really be bothered reading to find out. Yeah, I was skipping through, and then it ended up being like a really bizarre, convoluted story, which genres can tend to do, which in the past I've enjoyed. So yeah, maybe I will read more of his books. I think I've got The Marriage Act on my TBR, which is set in the same universe as The One, which is one of the ones that I gave 5 stars. So I stopped reading that in 2022, and then later on that year I then DNF'd Case Study by Graham McCrae Bennett. This one drew me in by the cover. I thought the cover was really beautiful, and I thought it sounded quite interesting because it was about a woman going to see a therapist. It had her letters about her going to therapy, and I think there was something to do with a sister. There was some sort of mystery going on. I didn't get very far into this one at all. It just, again, didn't really hook me in. I wasn't interested in the story or the characters, and it's more of a lit fic book, which I do struggle to actually get into. So yeah, I didn't get very far into this. Okay, now we're into 2023, and I think since 2023 is when I've DNF'd the most books. So the first one that I DNF'd was actually a 5-star prediction, and that was Fantastic Land by Mike Bokoven. This sounds like my perfect book. It is basically a survival horror / thriller set in an abandoned theme park, and basically there's been some sort of disaster hurricane situation which basically leaves a bunch of employees stranded, which is kind of set up for them to be able to survive there anyway, as in they've got quite a lot of provisions, and if they just kind of eat normally, behave normally, then they would be able to stay there for weeks at a time, and they would also be paid quite a lot of money to do so. And it's also told via interview, so I thought it would be so interesting. It literally takes all my boxes, and it sounds very like Lord of the Flies, and I thought I would love it. Unfortunately, I got like 60% of the way through and I was so bored. Each chapter is from the perspective of a different character, and I'm not sure if you ever revisit the same people again. And I just didn't feel like they had different enough voices. It was meant to be like a variety of different people, like different ages, different jobs, and honestly, they all sounded like the same person. It really annoyed me how there was just like no explanation as to why any of this kicked off. And some people say that that's like part of the horror of it, is that people just do things for the sake of it. And I just didn't get it, because the whole point of this was that they were literally going to be fine. Like, they signed up for this, they were going to be paid a lot of money, they had all the food that they could need, but people started hoarding food anyway, and it just kind of drove me mad. And I know that that might be the point, and it might be the point is humans are just crap, but it almost just felt a bit like lazy to me, that there was just no reason. It was just, okay, this is happening, there's no backstory, there's no context or development at all. It's just people start like impaling people on sticks, putting heads on sticks, and I just think, you're all like 19, 20 years old, most of you. Why are you doing this? I didn't get it at all. And as I said, this was a 5-star prediction, so it broke my heart to not like this book. So unfortunately, I gave up on it. I think if I'd have finished it, I probably would have given it like a 2-star max anyway, so there's just no point me wasting my time doing that. Next up is a bit of a sad DNF, and it's a soft DNF, so I'm gonna have to go back to this at some point, and it's Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So this is a speculative fiction novel. We're basically following this specific coffee shop where you can go back in time, but there's tons of different rules. It's only for a very short time before the coffee gets cold. You can't sort of leave the coffee shop, as in like you'll time travel in the spot that you're in. You can only see people that have been in the coffee shop before. Like, it's a very strict, rigid version of time travel. And I'd heard that this book was very sad and emotional and moving, and my boyfriend got it for me, so he's written a really lovely like inscription in the front of this book for me. So I've got a really lovely physical copy, and I tried reading it. I think I got to like, I think there's 4 stories in each of these books, and I've definitely read the first one, and I think I was like halfway through the second one. I was just getting a little bit bored. I found the writing to be a bit odd, and it might be the translation, but I thought that it focused way too much on like silly details, and there's a lot of like repetition, and it didn't engage me. But it's a short book, and I might just have to read it a little less like closely next time and almost like skip the bits that I'm not interested in. Like, I remember it would really overly describe what people were wearing, and I just don't need that in my life. So yeah, maybe next time I will just sort of focus more on the actual stories themselves rather than the background of it all and them like talking about the rules over and over again. So let me know what you thought of this one, because I should try it again soon, probably. And then a month later, so in September, I DNF'd another 5-star prediction, and that was Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter. So this is a mixed media murder mystery Netflix documentary inspired book, which sounds like my dream. We're basically following this guy who, I think his family, there was some sort of death in his family, and he has all of these unanswered questions. So he basically decides to film a Netflix documentary and get all of these different experts involved, and it had loads of different like articles and tweets and messages and screenplay scripts and everything. But my main issue with this was that most of it was this like screenplay of the Netflix documentary. So it was written with all the like stage commands and lighting choices, and the camera zooms in here. For me, it just didn't fit a book format. Like, I would have rather them do like a satirical documentary or like a fake documentary or drama or something. I feel like just reading that was really, really boring. And then we were also meant to suspect some of the experts that were getting involved with the documentary, and I just thought, like, what a coincidence that all these people are involved. It just kind of annoyed me. So I didn't get very far into this one, but yeah, this was another one that I thought would be really for me. Another one that I got from the library, so I could give it back with no regrets. And now we get up to 2024, which is the year where I'm DNFing like mad. So we're in April and I've already got 5 DNFs. Actually, we're in May. So the first one I think that I DNF'd was The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. And I've been putting this book off for years. I think I bought it back in like 2021 maybe, because I read this author's other book, which was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and I really loved that one because it was a historical mystery which was very complex and detailed, but then it had this weird sort of twist at the end which I really liked. But this one is set in like the 1600s. It's on this ship and we're following this guy who's the bodyguard of a famous detective. So the detective has been imprisoned within the ship, and basically the bodyguard needs to try and figure something out, and there's the question of whether there's like ghosts or supernatural things involved, and I was so bored. Again, I think I got like 130 pages in and I just wasn't into it. I wasn't into the historical setting. I didn't really like the main character. I didn't like this like hint of a romance that was going on. Basically there was like nothing in it that I really liked. And then we got to this page where one of the characters has stomach issues and he has to go. He like hops on the railings of the ship to do it like in the sea, and it was ridiculously over-described. Just this paragraph of like this guy having stomach problems over the sea, over the ocean, and at that moment I literally shut the book and was like, no. It's not even like it was happening a lot or anything, it was just so like random. I didn't get it, so I closed the book. No regrets. It's currently on my Vinted if you want to buy it. The next book that I DNF'd was The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Baird, or Bard. I didn't really get that far into it. I decided to listen to it on audio. I probably got about 3 hours in. This is kind of a slower paced dystopia where men get this kind of contagious illness. They basically catch it, become really ill very quickly, and they die. And we're following loads of different people's perspectives, women's perspectives of this crisis, and having their family members die, people who are trying to solve this crisis, people who are trying to get people to notice it. I think one of the perspectives is a doctor who kind of first discovers that this is a thing, and she's trying to raise it as a serious problem, and she just keeps getting dismissed. And I think it was interesting, and it's kind of scary that this came out round pandemic time, I think, probably written before COVID-19, but it does have quite a lot of similarities. So I thought this would be a very like thought-provoking book, theorising what would happen if a large percentage of men just died, and there's a lot of like high-profile jobs that are done by men and what would happen to the world. But I just wasn't really invested, and I feel like it's partially because we've all been through the COVID-19 pandemic, and whether it feels a little bit like close to home now, I don't know. I honestly think that if COVID hadn't have happened, I probably would be more into these kinds of books, but it almost feels like too real at this point. So unfortunately that was a DNF as well. Next up I had Marlena by Julie Bunting, and you know what, I think I just need to stop reading litfic books because the next one is litfic as well, and maybe I just need to admit that I'm not really a litfic person. To be fair, there's quite a few books that I've given 5 stars, like I can think of Expectation by Anna Hope, Reservoir 13, The Lovely Bones, although admittedly a lot of my like fiction reading has either like a mystery element or there's some kind of darker side to it. So yeah, maybe I just need to steer away from these like more everyday lit fics because I just find them really, really boring. So Marlena is about this like toxic friendship between these 2 teenage girls. I just didn't really buy into the friendship straight away because one of them is obviously like super like rebellious and beautiful and amazing, and then our main character is kind of drab and boring, and it just felt kind of stereotypical, and I didn't really buy into their connection. And I did get over 100 pages into it, so I did give it a fair chance, and I thought it would be a little bit more mysterious, and I didn't care, so I ended up not liking this either. I think this one might be on my Vinted as well, so if you want it, you can hit me up on there. And then I've had a little bit of a reading slump in May so far, so I've actually DNF'd 2 books in May, and we're running on the 15th. So the first one that I DNF'd was Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I think it might just be contemporary fiction. I'm just not as much of a fan as I thought I was. This is a book about Cleo and Frank who meet in New York. She's much younger than him, and they basically enter this whirlwind, very fast marriage, and we're following kind of them but also the people around them, and each chapter's told by a different character. I wasn't bothered about the characters again, like maybe that is such a big thing for me with books, I don't know. Like I just didn't have a favourite, I wasn't really bothered. And initially I thought I was really going to like this because the first chapter of this book is really, really good. I loved that initial sort of connection between Cleo and Frank, how they instantly just click. I loved that, and I thought this would be more like romancy, but then they very quickly become married. I think in the next chapter they're married. So for me, like a lot of that tension and build up was completely gone, which I should have known from the blurb anyway. And then I just couldn't really see where it was going. Like there wasn't really a plot, it was just slice of life but for very pretentious rich people in New York, and I just wasn't interested. And then I did read sort of what happened in the book, and I think I would have really grown to hate some of these characters, but I don't have any regrets. So that one is another one that is going to be going on my Vinted very soon. Yeah, quite a few 5-star predictions in this list actually. And then the last most recent book that I've DNF'd is Manacled by Senlin Yu. I don't know what came over me when I decided to go into this, but basically Manacled is a fanfiction about Draco and Hermione, but it's kind of renowned as one of the best fanfictions and people absolutely go wild over it. And this is basically like an alternate Harry Potter ending where Voldemort wins the war, Harry Potter dies, and it turns into a bit of a Handmaid's Tale situation. So Hermione is basically given to Draco to be a surrogate for his heir. I mean, red flags right from the start, right? Because I cannot stand books about like toxic love interests. Also, this book is like 900 pages long. On Kindle, it was 24 hours or 20 hours or something ridiculous like that. I read 33% of this book, so I read around 300 pages, which is like full book length. And you know what, I was actually really enjoying it. One of the main plot points in this book is that Hermione has all these memories that she's basically hidden from herself, and Voldemort and Draco are trying to get her to remember them. So apparently she's got like this Order of the Phoenix secret. That was like the thing that I was really into. I was hoping that we would get this whole like fun backstory. It was too much romance, okay? I was kind of buying into it at the start because it was very, very slow build, and although it was quite repetitive and drawn out, I figured that because it's fanfic and it was likely published like in chapters, you would need to sort of refresh readers on what was going on. So I kind of understood why it was written like that. But you know, when you get into like 300 pages and it's not really moved at all, then it was kind of starting to bug me. So it's basically split into the sections of like present day, flashbacks, and then present day again, and I was really looking forward to the flashbacks. So I was thinking it would be like Hermione fighting the war with like Harry, Ron, all that stuff, but any sort of action scene was just skipped over so quick, and it went back to like a Draco Hermione romance. And at that point I just thought, you know what, this is not for me. This is not what I want. I don't know why I was wanting like Harry Potter 2.0, you know, like a kind of dark version of Harry Potter, like if it went just a little bit more intense. But Harry Potter is so precious to me anyway that this was always like a massive risk to try and read. But I do remember reading some Hermione fanfics when I was like a teenager, although I do think that I used to read more of the like sillier ones. So I definitely remember one between like Hagrid and Snape, which was very unusual, but me and my friend read that. And I think I used to read a lot of the like James and Lily ones. I used to like the Marauders era fanfics, like from when they meet back up again in the flashbacks. He literally, like, he buys her. Draco buys Hermione. I don't know if there's some other like reveal as to like why that happens and like why that is okay. No. You want me to buy into this? This is not cute. That is all the books that I have DNF'd in the last, well, all my life, I think, as far as I can remember. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's given you a little bit of motivation to DNF books. If you're not enjoying them, if they're feeling like a slog, if you don't think you're going to enjoy it by the end, just put it down. Or even better, if you've still got books that are on your shelves that you've not even started reading but you've just like lost interest in, just get rid of them. I do that all the time. I'm always looking through my physical TBR downstairs and just getting rid of books, like even just like one or two that I've had for years I'm never going to read, and it just makes me feel a lot calmer, a lot more like zen and at peace with my reading. I'm a big advocate for DNFing, and I encourage you all to take on that energy for the rest of this year. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video if you've made it this far. Again, I'm going to apologise for the lack of videos, but I promise it is not through a lack of trying. Does that phrase make sense? I don't know, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that I have tried to film videos. The amount that I'm just deleting and saying it isn't good, I look ugly in this video, just like silly stuff like that, means that it's getting binned. But one day I will get my shit together. But anyway, thank you for sticking around. If you like this video, give it a like so I know that you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!